and the nationally admired leader for his socio-economic and political achievements. Truly Pan-Africanist and architect of modern Ethiopia, the late Prime Minister Meles Zenawi.
In this country, especially in terms of the history of this country in building democracy, I can say he is one of the pioneers, the very few pioneers in a country that can roadmap the whole life of a nation.
I knew him personally, starting from when he was a student. How would I describe him as a person? Very competent, very intelligent, very articulate, at the same time quite humble, positively interacting, not at all pompous, well oriented towards his goal that he wanted to achieve. A leader like that doesn't come very often, very easily.
I never ever heard about leader of this country who went to most grassroots level, remote area, sit under tree with the people and try to listen to them, and then bring that view into the public discourse, the public policy discourse, using that as an input for policy framework, for implementation, and for correction of different wrongs.
2 decades ago, Ethiopia was an undemocratic country where the rights of people were not fully observed. Coming to power in 1991, Meles and his ruling party embarked on a democratization process for the first time in the long history of the nation.
Over the past 2 decades, Ethiopia has embarked on a new chapter. Its past has been a very turbulent, experienced a very autocratic, dictatorial, monarchical kind of system of governance. But after that, with the end of the fall of the Derg regime, a new chapter has begun, and that new chapter has been building democracy.
Constitution is an essential element in an effort to build reliable democracy in any country. On December 8, 1994, the nations, nationalities and peoples of Ethiopia, through their elected representatives, ratified the Constitution of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. The role of the late Prime Minister Meles was very crucial in the process of bringing this constitution into being.
He has been very instrumental in having his own contribution towards the content of the constitution which the country is now being governed. And then after that, practically putting in place, not only contributing his views, but also contributing towards what have been achieved in theory into practice. In terms of opening up the political system, in terms of introducing a kind of civilized debate, public debates over different kind of issues in this country. As a behavior that can be considered as listening, opening debates, putting your own view and positions also on the table so that people can choose the best out of it.
The current constitution of Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia was not copied from other country, as it was the case with the constitution of previous regime. It was derived from the socio-economic and political context of the country.
At the time the constitution was adopted, why that constitution was adopted, and what was the situation that compelled for the adoption of that constitution, the constitution that introduced democratic system of governance. The constitution want to achieve two goals. One is a politically unified, coherent society, and economically unified, coherent society. This is the two major goals. You can simply look at the preamble of the Constitution and understand these two goals that the Constitution wants to achieve in this country.
After the Constitution was adopted and later implemented, Prime Minister Mallas and his ruling party were busy in the effort of building an institutional and legal framework, which is very crucial for the exercise of democratic rights and the implementation of democratic governance.
በግለሰብ ብቻ መተማመን ትክክለኛ ነው ያላልንም የኢትዮጵያ መንግስት የምናቋቁመውና የምናስፋፋው ስርዓት በግለሰቦች ላይ ተንጠለጠለ ሳይሆን በህጎች እና በተቋሞች ላይ የተመሰረተ መሆን አለበት የሚል ነው ያለን።
As a country we are able to put in place all the necessary institutional framework that is required for the effective implementation. You can see the two legislative houses that is put in place, the executive organ that is put in place, the federal central government and states having their own autonomy, having their own constitution, governing their affairs by themselves, by their own constitution, the constitution that they themselves have adopted for themselves, for taking into consideration the specific contexts of each and every states. So now today we have 9 constituent states of the federation, which is exercising their legislative power, their executive power, their judicial power. Citizens are actively participating in that, exercising their right to language, to culture, their right to choose the government they want to, and so on and so on.
After many ups and downs, Ethiopia maintained durable peace and stability in the Horn of Africa, which is mainly attributed to the extraordinary work of Mallas' leadership in building institutional and legal frameworks. As a result of the gained peace and stability, the country managed to achieve all-rounded development and sustainable economic growth.
If in a country you do not have peace and stability, you might as well say goodbye to growth. It is fundamental. Having peace and having stability is fundamental. In the case of Ethiopia, peace and stability was secured through the new constitution. The new constitution creates a republic that is based on multi-party system and also on a federation of states. These are the twin pillars of the modern republic. And this was created by the EPRDF under the leadership of Mallas.
Ethiopia has achieved the status of being the most stable nation in the Horn of Africa, and in a sub-region which is very turbulent. Yet at the same time, since the adoption of this constitution and the introduction of democratic governance in this country, we are able to stabilize the system, introduce a wonderful durable peace, which allow the citizens and the people in this country to focus on other socio-economic and political affairs. That has created a fast-track development in terms of health, in terms of education, in terms of infrastructure, and so on and so on. Become one of few fastest growing economy in this world, not only in Africa.
Given peace and stability, the next thing for economic growth is to be able to have a political economy that can drive growth. If your economic strategy and your political strategy are not consistent with each other, then you will not have growth. Let me give you the example of the Derg period. In the Derg period, the rhetoric at least was that of a broad-based growth. The population at large was meant to benefit from growth. But in reality, its focus was in the urban areas. So the political economy was misaligned. Its political base was the urban areas. Its economic slogan was broad-based growth. The two do not go together. In the case of EPRDF, its political base is the population at large, and its economic focus is one of broad-based growth. Not simply the urban areas, but also the rural areas. So you also need a political economy that is well aligned. And thirdly, you need relatively good economic policies, which I indicated to you earlier on. I think you can find the reason for growth in Ethiopia during the last 2 decades in these 3 areas.
Under the leadership of Meles, Ethiopia has formulated sound economic policy, helping it to maintain sustainable economic growth over the past 2 decades.
In the 90s, our growth rate was quite respectable, around 5% per year, and we had the tremendous challenge of structural adjustment. Normally, during periods of structural adjustment, countries face a lot of instability. Exchange rates tend to depreciate and go out of control, and inflation tends to go very high. We managed both challenges of inflation and currency depreciation that are inherent to structure adjustment in a fairly stable manner. So it can be said we had both growth and stability.
Over the last 10 years, the country registered fast and double-digit economic growth. The contribution of the late Prime Minister Meles takes the lion's share in this extraordinary achievement.
In the last decade, the government geared up towards greater growth. It had the opportunity of focusing on growth because, as I said earlier on, issues of structure adjustment were dealt with, and we could go in full force towards growing the economy as fast as possible. This was particularly done in 2 directions. One was growth of exports, which over the last 10 years more or less trebled, and the other was in investment in infrastructure, in various other activities, including real estate development in different parts of the country.
ከማደርግባቸው የገጠር ልማት የጥናትና ምርምር ስራዎች የሚገርሙ ሁኔታዎችን ለማየት ችያለሁ። ያ ምንድነው በህዝቡ ገቢ፣ በህዝቡ አኗኗር፣ በህዝቡ አመጋገብ፣ በህዝቡ የመኖሪያ ቤት ሁኔታ ላይ መሻሻሎችን በደንብ አይቻለሁ።
Through the leadership of Mallas and after his passing away, Ethiopia has been striving in a way that all citizens could benefit from the country's economic growth.
With the federal system of government, if you want it to be viable, then you must have more or less even distribution of growth geographically. So the commitment of the late Prime Minister on this front arises out of the very system that he has put in place.
The late Prime Minister Mallas was the only African leader in arguing the concept of developmental state at international stage. He firmly believed in the very capability of the realization of the developmental state to lift out his country and a continent out of poverty.
The Prime Minister was at the center of it all. But if we want to define specifically contributions that can be clearly attributed to him, there are possibly two areas. One is the concept of developmental state. The concept of developmental state came from him and him alone. I'm an economist. I have been trained in standard economics, but I must say the idea of developmental state had escaped me, and so was the case with my colleagues. So if today we have developmental state, it is he who introduced it. The second contribution of PM Mallas is his capacity and willingness to think big. He came up with the whole concept of big jump, particularly in the last decade. So in these are two fundamental contributions of the Prime Minister in the economic field.
Mallas Zenawi suddenly died on August 20, 2012. Following his death, many scholars, politicians, members of public and international community have speculated the possibility of instability and lagging behind in economic growth.
It was not surprising to hear that at that time because of the context within which normally any African country, whenever its leader died, that was what they expect. It happened a lot. In most of African countries, it happened that way. Whenever a leader died or for different reasons being removed, then a lot of instability happened in a given country. And it is good to ask why this happened in most of African countries. It is because most of the system of governance, be it a country with a democratic constitution, democratic system and so on or not, it is that kind of destabilization whenever a leader passed away happens in Africa because the leadership is highly personalized. It is not institutionalized. Whenever a system is not institutionalized and simply hanged on very few individuals or one individual, in most of African countries that happened, then when that person go for different reasons, a lot of destabilization happens.
But that didn't happen. Economic growth was maintained and peaceful power transition was evidenced.
All the speculations the rumors and so on, proven otherwise. And the question is why? I think for me the question why those speculations has been proven otherwise is because over the past few decades since the adoption of this constitution, most of the efforts that have been done by the late Prime Minister and his ruling party, as well as the constitutionally established government in this country, is institutionalizing the whole system of governance. I mean, it is not a foregone completed project, but it is a project that has been started with the introduction of the Constitution. And that really benefited when that incident happened. From day one of the coming into force of the Constitution, the government in this country has started to institutionalize what is there in the Constitution. So that institutionalization of that process over the past 2 decades has paid us back for me.
We have lost a Prime Minister, a great leader, but we have not lost our economic policies and directions which under his leadership were set in place. So we still have the same policies. The policies that secured fast growth for us during his leadership are also with us today. And it's the same party, it's the same leadership. There is very little reason to expect for us not to grow as we did in the past. What is basic is the continuity. There was continuity because the system that was put in place was robust. There was no break.
አሁን ስራን ስላጣጣመን በጣም ወደ ስራ ገብተን በኃይል እየሰራን ነው። ከዚህ ኢንዱስትሪ ወደ ካምፓኒ ልንቀይር ይችላል። ይሄ ከምንድን ነው ብትል ስትራቴጂ የተነሳ ያው አሸናፊ ሆነናል፣ ድህነትን አሸንፈናል። አሁንም ገና እናሸንፋለን።
በዚህ በ2005 ዓመተ ምህረት ቀደም ብለው የታቀዱ የጂቲፒ ፕሮግራሞች በሙሉ በገጠር ልማቱም በአካባቢ ጥበቃውም በጤናውም ረገድ ቀጣይነት ነበራቸው ማለት ይቻላል።
የተነደፉት ፖሊሲዎችና ስትራቴጂዎች የሚያሰሩና ለወደፊቱም ሀገራችንን ወደ አዲስ ምዕራፍ ወይም ደግሞ መካከለኛ ገቢ ካላቸው ሀገሮች ተርታ ለማሰለፍ የተነደፈ የረጅም ዓመታት ፖሊሲ በመሆኑና ሁለተኛም ደግሞ ህዝቡ በጠቅላይ ሚኒስትራችን ህልፈት ምክንያት እሳቸው የጀመሩትን ስራዎች እናስቀጥላለን፣ የበለጠ አጎልብተን የበለጠ አጠናክረን እናስኬዳለን ባለው መሰረት የዛ እልህና ቁጭት የፈጠረው ስሜትና ተግባር ነው ብዬ ነው የማስበው።
Understanding the impact of climate change, the late Prime Minister Mallas has also embarked on green economy over the past few years. Notable result was also achieved in planting trees and raising the awareness of society on the need to protect our environment.
እኔ 4 ችግኝ ነው የተከልኩት። 4ቱ ችግኞች ያው ሁለቱ ለቀጣይ ወደፊት ለሚመጡት ትውልድ አትሊስት እኛ ጥሩ ነገር አረንጓዴ የሆነች ኢትዮጵያን ለማስረከብ የሚቻልበት አይነት ሁኔታ ስላለ አረንጓዴ የሆነ ኢትዮጵያን ለማስረከብ የሚቻልበትና አሪያ ሆኖ ለመገኘት ነው። ሌላው ክቡር ጠቅላይ ሚኒስትር የአረንጓዴውን ልማት በጀመሩት መልክ የእሳቸውን ማስታወሻ የሚሆነው ሌላ የተከሉት
The role as the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, he led the development of the green economy in Ethiopia. It is because he also believed in it that we technical people were able to follow on and do the things that we can to readjust the economy and also ask for help from technical help, technical capacity from abroad in those aspects for which we do not have the capacity. So this is internally in Ethiopia.
In addition to his magnificent contribution for his home country, Meles had also played an important role in developing the African Union's position on climate change.
Prime Minister Meles Zenawi, as chair of the Committee of African Heads of State and Government on Climate Change, helped develop Africa's attitude in both its international negotiation positions and also promoted green economy throughout Africa. Consequently, the African governments, in preparation to the Rio +20 Summit on Sustainable Development, took the position that Africa is going to develop along a green path. And this should be reflected in the Rio +20 decisions, which has happened. And I don't mean to imply it was only he that achieved this, but he played a major part in convincing African governments to take this path.
The legacy of the late Prime Minister Meles Zenawi is visible in every sector. Under his leadership, the government introduced federal system, freedom of press, multi-party political system, and sustainable double-digit economic growth for the first time in the history of Ethiopia. These are some of the things to be remembered about Meles Zenawi.
I believe his legacy will remain for many years to come in the field of the developmental state that he has, the idea of developmental state that he has put in place. If you want fast economic growth, that also pays attention to equity, then I think it is of paramount importance that you allow the state enough space, enough room to guide the economic growth. And that in our context means the sustained application of the developmental state in our economic life.
Unfortunately, he has left us, and therefore it does not become his responsibility. It is the responsibility of those of us who have stayed behind to follow in fulfilling his vision. So far, I am very happy. What he started is continuing to be pushed on, and as I pointed out earlier, forests will play a major role in absorbing greenhouse gases, that forestry was given not a prominent status in the Ethiopian administrative organization, but now our new Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn has established a Ministry of Environmental Protection and Forests, and he is continuing with what Prime Minister Meles Zenawi has been doing.
Ethiopians and partners of Ethiopia marked first year of Meles Zenawi Memorial in Addis Ababa at Gulale Botanic Center. The events aim at laying a foundation to maintain his legacy in institutional ways. Speaking at the opening of the memorial event, Ethiopian Prime Minister Hailemariam Desalegn said the sudden death of the former leader is a great loss not only for Ethiopians but also for Africans. But Ethiopians are struggling their best to maintain his legacy and achieve his vision.
የህዝብ ድርጅት ስለሆነ በምንም መልኩ ወደ ቀውስ የሚገባ ሳይሆን በመርህ እየተመራ እርሳቸው የጀመሩትን ማስቀጠል ችሏል። የኢትዮጵያ ህዳሴ ጎዳና የቀየሱልን ታላቁ መሪያችን ለሚቀጥሉት በርካታ ዓመታት ህዳሴያችንን ለማረጋገጥ የሚያስችል ሁኔታ ውስጥ አስቀምጠውን መስዋዕት ሆነዋል።
The premier stated Meles was both an inspired and inspiring leader who could establish constitutionalism and right development policy for his country. He laid the foundation for development of the nation by designing the right homegrown policies that are being implemented, he added. Hailemariam stressed Ethiopia will continue its efforts to